Hello, I'm Rhiannon Grant. I'm a staff member with Woodbrook, and I'm very pleased to be working with Wendy Cooler to run a course about deep hospitality. Wendy, would you like to start by introducing yourself?
Yes, my name is Wendy Cooler. I always tell people that I did not name myself. I was named for the song by the association. My mother named me this. And I am very happy to be working with Rhiannon again. I'm a public minister. You might be able to tell I am an American. I belong to Sandy Spring Meeting and Baltimore Yearly Meeting.
And Wendy, we started talking about deep hospitality a long time ago. Can you remind me how we got started with that and how you think it was you who picked that as a phrase and a topic to explore?
Yeah, that's true. I So I was doing a series called Testimonies to Mercy. It was this 7-part series in the United States, sponsored by a retreat center here called Powell House. And we wanted to finish the series on on a sort of optimistic note about how we could make our meetings our homes. Um, and you really came to mind first as the keynote speaker for that, and I was very pleased when you said yes. The lecture, which anyone can view online to this day, was really brilliant and just continues to inspire me. Specifically, I remember your sort of intuitive storytelling and how you seem to be making the case that we could reduce some of these things that feel really complicated and burdensome in our Quaker communities to experiences we've already had. And I remember you talking about the experience of moving in with your wife, um, and how at the beginning of your relationship, when she was a guest in your home, you wouldn't necessarily expect her or want her to make a meal, that you would make a meal. But as your relationship progressed, you would welcome her in the kitchen with you, but you wouldn't expect her to rearrange your flatware drawer. Um, and when she moved in, you still wouldn't expect her to rearrange your flatware drawer without talking to you first, but this was her home too. And the expectation became that you were equals as householders in this home, and that you could decide together how the home would look and feel. And that just felt so applicable. It's an experience many of us have had. And it felt very applicable to the Quaker meeting that I belong to, where we join this meeting. We don't usually grow up in the meeting. And the expectation, hopefully, is that we will become householders eventually, though it is sometimes unclear how to move ahead and develop a relationship with the meeting that really works for everyone, where everyone is truly an equal in this meeting that is a householder. Um, I'm wondering, actually, Rhiannon, why you accepted my invitation to lecture to a bunch of Americans about deep hospitality.
Yeah, I think some of it was that I trust your discernment and you invited me, and I was interested in the topic, and I think I'm often interested in trying to find ways to explore things, to think things through more clearly, more accessibly, and I often am interested in that sort of metaphor, like the one I set up in the lecture, between experiences we might have in the home or the family and experiences we might have in the meeting, which is something that I'd kind of touched on before, but it was really nice to have an opportunity to explore that at much greater length and to think through some examples and how that might play out in more detail. So I think one of the things that we're going to do in this course is play with that metaphor, which we put in the title, to talk about friend, guest, or family, different ways that you might relate to people. And in the first week, I'll be setting up that metaphor and looking at some of the ways in which it might work, and how it might shed some light on these situations that we find ourselves in. I think, as a member of the Quaker community in Britain and as a Woodbrook tutor, I hear from quite a lot of people who are struggling with that relationship with their meeting in various ways, and finding some ways to articulate that and to be able to talk it through and think it through, that might give us some clues about where to go and how to heal things or to move forward positively. Hopefully is potentially useful, and I guess by the end of the course we might have found out whether it's useful to people in practice. So I think in my own writing process, both in creating the lecture and then in turning it into the Pendle Hill pamphlets, I found it quite useful for myself, actually, to try and express some of these things in other terms, to think through, where does this metaphor work? What insights might it give? And of course, I also found some places where, like any metaphor, it doesn't work, and we might have to turn to other images as well. Uh, mm, and one of the things that came through in using that metaphor was that it gave me some ways to think about what it means to belong, to not just have a formal belonging, like a piece of paper that says I'm a member, but to think through, what does it mean to really be active in a community and to belong to it, and to think about how the power dynamics might play out. Those are, I think, quite familiar in relationships between family members, or where you've got family and staff living in the same household. And that helped me to think through some of the things that might be happening in a meeting. So I wonder if you want to say a bit more about that, what you're going to talk about in the kind of middle section of our course about power and belonging.
Indeed, belonging and power are very common themes in my public ministry. If listeners are familiar with my work, they probably remember me as the person that talks a lot about interpersonal violence, abuse, conflict. A lot of my public ministry work has been in service to communities that are in some kind of explicit crisis. And often the crisis has been a long time coming, but it feels like a surprise to the communities that call on me to help with discernment work there. Um, in my work, and the thing that I really feel like I have to offer to sort of supplement the metaphor that you have set up, Rhiannon, is some conceptual um, work around, what it means to belong. I'd like to, really explore deeply with participants in our bodies, our experiences of belonging, our longing to belong, what how we know we truly belong to someone else and someone else truly belongs to us. I think in service to that, we're going to delve a little bit into family systems theory, which is a topic I'm very fond of. Specifically, I'd like to talk about the concepts of triangulation and the identified patient, and how these block our sense of real belonging, but are very common in all of our relationships, particularly our family relationships, and therefore our relationships at Quaker Meeting. In addition to that, I've done a lot of work around power in Quaker communities, as many of us have noted in our work against white supremacy culture and decolonization work. Power dynamics in the outside world unfortunately repeat themselves inside of our meetings. Our meetings are not impervious to the ways of the world. And so recognizing that as it occurs, and tenderly and carefully and wisely engaging in the work to deconstruct and understand power, and how it impacts our ability to love each other fully, is going to be the topic of the third week. In both the second and the third week, belonging and power, we're going to be working with some case studies that come from my personal life in my family, in connection with incidents that I have seen in real Quaker meetings in the course of my work, though the identities of these meetings is carefully obstructed. Um, and then I would also like to invite participants to bring their own case studies with them and work with me to make these situations less recognizable to other participants, so that we can kind of brainstorm on your real lived experiences around belonging and power. Can you tell us, Rhiannon, how you're going to close this course, the last 2 sessions?
Yeah, so at the end of the lecture and at the end of the pamphlet, I tried to give some really practical suggestions about changes we might make in our meetings to make them more welcoming, to bring people into this deeper kind of hospitality. And I'm hoping that in the last couple of sessions, we'll work through some of those in detail. We might think of some other things that you could do. We might talk about real life examples and also think about how and why these things matter. So one of my suggestions, for example, is that we get a lot more relaxed about time and about the start time of meetings, and we welcome people in even if they're running late, even if it feels like they're disturbing us. And I want to talk a bit about why it's important that we're open to being interrupted rather than trying to control things that are actually outside of our control. And I think that that will pick up very much on some of the discussions we've had about power and about dynamics within a community, whether that's a family or a meeting. And hopefully it will give participants something specific that they can take away and say, I'm going to talk to my meeting about this, I'm going to make a change in my own life in the way I treat other people, and go away with something really concrete that you can do. So if all of that sounds interesting to you, we're running this course online with Woodbrook. We're starting in September. Bookings are open on the website now, so all of the details will be in the post along with this video, and we'd very much like to see you there.
Well, it sure sounds interesting to me. So I'll be there. I'm signed up.
Well, I'm very glad you're going to be there with me, Wendy. Thank you.
Thank you.